what's going on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the King Crimson vinyl reissues. Now, what can be said about King Crimson? They are hands down one of the pioneers of the progressive rock genre, and they are a band that has always been, in a sense, progressive. And that's not because of their association with other bands such as Yes, Genesis, and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. If you look at their discography and you work your way through it, you'll realize that this band has evolved since day one up until the present day. They dabbled in a little bit of the neoclassical stuff in their early years. Then they went on to do some more jazzier improvisational kind of stuff in the mid-70s. Went on to do a little bit more new wave type of stuff in the 80s. And even went as far as becoming a bit more industrial in the 90s going into the 2000s. And they are one of the very few bands to come out at the time frame when they did, which for these guys is the late 60s, to still play live to this day and still put out occasional new material. And it's because of all that that I have so much love and respect for King Crimson, and they are one of my top favorite progressive rock bands ever. Now, before I talk about the reissues, I do want to point out something really cool that not a lot of artists that are on the professional caliber of King Crimson can say, and when it comes to their catalog. They essentially have the power and the ability to do whatever they want with their discography, their legacy, their career, and not have to worry about major label corporations and whatnot. It's all done under their own umbrella. Now, when I say there, I mean Robert Fripp. Now, Robert Fripp is the guitarist of King Crimson. He has been there since the first album and is still with them to this day. And the way he describes King Crimson is a way of doing things, which I think is a more sophisticated way of saying that it is his band. And in the 90s, along with David Singleton, he went on to start a label called Discipline Global Mobile, otherwise known as DGM. And ever since the 90s, anything King Crimson related, Robert Fripp related, side projects, and other artists and whatnot have been released under the DGM banner. And there has always been a consistency of quality with their product, whether it be on CD, DVD, Blu-rays, box sets, vinyl, anything. It is always really good. So, spoiler alert, I think these vinyl reissues are absolutely awesome, but I will explain later on why I think that in this video. So, DGM looked over these vinyl reissues, and these started coming out as early as 2010. They've been putting them out pretty much once a year ever since then. So, of course, they started off with the best place to start, which is the first album. And this is In the Court of the Crimson King. A little bit of a side note. This album is up there with Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon as like those albums that you must own in your like vinyl collection. Even if you don't collect vinyl, if you are just a appreciator of music, this album is absolutely essential. This is one of the greatest records of all time. Of course, that is my opinion, but I'm sure a lot of people will agree. If you're watching this and you haven't heard this album, which I'll be surprised if that's the case, but you never know, this album is absolutely essential in every single way. So that came out first, and then the following year, in 2011, we got the band's second album. This is In the Wake of Poseidon. This kind of goes hand in hand with Crimson King in terms of the sound and the direction, but Crimson King is a little bit more direct and focused. Then after that, in 2012, we got the third album, which is Lizard. Now, this is the band kind of going into a more jazzier kind of sound. Very underappreciated, and it's a little bit of the underdog of the early King Crimson discography, so this is definitely an interesting one. Then we go slightly out of sequence a bit. We then got what was the band's last studio album in the 70s. This is Red. This is another fantastic record, and this album inspired Kurt Cobain. And so for anyone that's into grunge and whatnot, I would say definitely check this record out, and you can kind of see perhaps where some of the influence comes through with this particular release. And then we go out of sequence once again with Lark's Tongues and Aspic. Now, This album, along with Crimson King, are the two essential records, in my opinion, if you want to get into the early Crimson stuff. They just are very distinguished, and it sums up the band perfectly. This album is sensational in every single way possible. Absolutely love it. Then the next one that we got came out after Lizard, but before Lark's Tongues. This is Islands, and I feel that this is one of the band's more mellower records. There's still a little bit of that jazz element from Lizard carry on to this, but I just felt personally that it was a little bit more mellow and a bit more calm, which is not bad. I did enjoy this when I gave this a listen. And the next one that we got is a live album. Now, this came out when the band had disbanded after Red. This is USA. The lineup on this record consists of Robert Fripp, John Wetton, Bill Bruford, and David Cross, and that lineup is one of my favorite Crimson lineups, and it captures them so wonderfully on this record. I would say if you want to get into King Crimson's live stuff, this is a great place to start. And the next one that we got came out in between Larks and Red. This is one of my personal favorites. This is Starless and Bible Black. Now, this features some live improvisations that the band did on the live stage. What they would do is they would record the shows and use some of the improv bits on albums, and this is the most notable one that they use some live stuff from. They did it on this record, and they also did it on Red as well, but this is the best example for it, and this is one of, like I said, one of my personal favorites. And that's for the early stuff, and it wasn't until recently this year that they actually started to put out some of the 80s stuff. And of course, the first one that they put out was Discipline. For some odd reason, I really took my time getting into this record because I was always so absorbed with the early stuff that I was kind of not apprehensive, but I was really taking my time when it came to the 80s era King Crimson. And I really don't know why I took my time with it, because when I gave this a listen recently, I absolutely loved it, and it was just love at first listen. So I really did enjoy it very much. So all that right there is all that has been put out recently. Of course, I can suspect that they'll put out the other albums in their discography, such as Beat and 3 of a Perfect Pair. Maybe they'll put out Earthbound again, but then again, I feel like that's kind of unlikely considering the nature of the recording, which is a bit poor quality for being recorded on a cassette. But who knows? Maybe we'll see beyond the 80s. Maybe we'll see albums like Thrack and Construction of Light to be released, but we shall find out as the years go on. Now, in terms of packaging, everything is replicated wonderfully. All the gatefolds are replicated, such as in Starless and Bible Black. There was a much different album cover compared to what everyone else in the world got. This is the more standard cover. And inside features an insert, which is the American cover. So you have like the tie-dye little islands. And then when you open it up, it also features lyrics as well. And it all is of very good quality. And of course, the vinyl is pressed on 200-gram vinyl. So it is very heavy indeed. And it really feels of audiophile quality. And they're really pushing these to be like audiophile type records. And I can definitely, sense that. They all come on the pink, what would be the Pink Island label. And of course, it does feature the band's DGM label on there, and as well as these were put out by a company called, how do you pronounce it? Pangeric and Internaut. So they looked over this as well, but for the most part, it's DGM. Now, in terms of mastering, these were all done by a guy named John Dent over at Loud Mastering. Discipline was done by a guy named Jason Mitchell, and I suspect that perhaps he'll look over the other reissues that are to come in future years, so we shall find out. Also, I think it's the first edition that came out, I don't know if it was the first couple thousand, whatever, came with download codes. The more later versions don't come with download codes. But the cool thing with these download codes is that they're not just like the generic ones that you can just input to your computer and then just throw away. Personally, for myself, I would keep these because it's like a download postcard. So see, look, this is the one that came in USA. You have some pictures of the band performing in Asbury Park when the album was recorded. And then, of course, you also get your download code there, and you go online to a specific website and download a copy for yourself, which I believe is a original pressing dub without the pops and the clicks and whatnot. So that's really awesome to have as well. Now let's talk about the source audio. On each record, on the hype sticker, it states that these records were newly cut from masters approved by Robert Fripp. Now, there's been some speculation as to if these reissues are analog or if they're digital. Just from that phrase alone, I suspect that these were probably... they used the master tape, but they did a new digital transfer of it, and that is what was used on the records. And personally, I think these things sound absolutely excellent. There's a little bit more depth, there's a little bit more clarity. One album that I would just check out for sound quality alone is Lark's Tongues. When I first received this, I was absolutely blown away with how phenomenal the sound was. On the opening track, the crescendo that starts with the violin, and then the tension really builds up, and then when the band comes in, it is so in your face. It is so three-dimensional sounding. It is just absolutely sensational in every single way. Now, when it comes to Discipline, this is the one reissue that really is different from the others. Because it does feature the album, of course, but the mastering was done using the 30th anniversary CD remasters. Now, it does kind of make you think if perhaps these new masters approved by Fripp are a different variation of the 30th anniversary remasters. I'm not quite sure, but it did state that they used the 30th anniversary remaster for this. And in terms of the track listing, they did feature the alternate version of the song Mate Kudasai, which features a Robert Fripp lead, which is not found on the standard regular album version. So that's the one different thing when it comes to this particular reissue, but it doesn't take it away because personally I think that version should have appeared on the album than what became part of the original album, but that's besides the point. And I must say as well, when it comes to listening to these reissues, they're a bit of, not so much of an eye-opener, but I'm hearing things exactly the way that they were originally intended. Now, when I say that, I mean that they are using the original mixes. Of course, you Crimson fans know that the catalog has been remixed recently by Steven Wilson and Jacko Jaksic, and those editions are the ones that I am most common with. This is the 40th anniversary versions, so you get the remixed album, you get some bonus tracks and surround sound mixes. So before, I got these reissues, these were the most common formats of listening to these albums, so I was able to really hear with these vinyl reissues how they originally sounded, which I think is really cool. I know that there was some people questioning which versions were used, whether if it was the original mix or the remix. I can gladly say that it is the original mix, and it's just a great, interesting way after comparing them to the remixes. Now, these records are considerably affordable depending on where you get them from. If you get them from King Crimson's website, be prepared to spend around $25 to $30, which to me, in my opinion, is kind of pushing it. If you go on Amazon and you check these things out, depending on the day, they could be rather cheap or rather expensive. Some examples of how the prices that I got these for. I got Starless and Bible Black for about, I would say, $15. I also managed to get Discipline recently for $15. And I've even seen a record such as Islands go for as low as $13. So it does go to show that these are relatively affordable depending on when you get them. So if you ever see them for those low prices, please check them out for yourself. You will not be disappointed. These are absolutely great quality. And just knowing that these were overseen by the guy who has been the driving force of this band, you're definitely in for a treat. These are absolutely sensational.